In the ancient land of Egypt, a powerful battle unfolded, a myth that speaks of the eternal struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness. The conflict between Horus and Seth is not just a tale of gods vying for the throne of Egypt. It's a story that resonates deeply with Jungian psychology. Today, we'll explore how this epic myth aligns with the concepts of archetypes, the shadow, and the process of individuation in the human psyche. This myth is not just an ancient tale, but an insightful representation of our inner psychological struggles, the journey towards self-realization, and the universal battle between order and chaos that lives within all of us. The myth begins with the tragic death of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, at the hands of his brother Seth, god of chaos. Osiris, a wise and just ruler, was beloved by the people of Egypt, and his reign symbolized Ma'at, the divine order that kept the balance of the universe in check. Ma'at represented the principles of truth, justice, harmony, and cosmic balance, and Osiris upheld these ideals with a sense of fairness and wisdom. But Seth, filled with jealousy and an insatiable desire for power, plotted his brother's demise. In an act of cold treachery, Seth trapped Osiris in a coffin and threw it into the Nile River, where it was carried away. Osiris's body was eventually discovered, but before he could fully be revived, Seth murdered him again. In a cruel twist, Seth assumed control of the throne, disrupting the divine order Osiris had established. Isis, Osiris's wife, with the help of her sister Nephthys and the god Anubis, searched tirelessly for Osiris's body. After finding it, Isis used her powerful magic to bring Osiris back to life, if only for a brief moment, long enough to conceive a son, Horus. Horus, the child born of divine resurrection, became the symbol of hope and rightful kingship. However, Osiris was ultimately killed again by Seth. Yet, he did not disappear into oblivion. Osiris became the ruler of the underworld, where he oversaw the judgment of souls, and his death and resurrection symbolized the eternal cycle of life and death. Where rebirth was possible, Osiris's death was not an end, but a transition to a new role in the cosmic order. Now, with his father's death and Seth's usurpation of the throne, Horus swore to avenge Osiris's death and reclaim Egypt for its rightful ruler. The battle between Horus and Seth is the heart of the myth, but it is also a battle that transcends physical conflict and enters the realm of the psychic. It is the struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness, and the ego's fight for balance against the chaotic forces of the unconscious. Horus, the son of Osiris, represents the conscious ego and the self, which is striving for balance, integration, and individuation. Horus's journey mirrors the Jungian process of individuation, a path towards self-actualization where the individual works to integrate unconscious material and achieve a state of psychological wholeness. Horus is the figure who embodies order and justice, and his goal is to restore Egypt to its rightful state of harmony. Horus, like the ego, seeks to establish order in a world threatened by Seth's chaos. His strength lies not in physical might alone, but in his wisdom, his divine purpose, and his ability to uphold Ma'at, the cosmic order. Jung often spoke of the self as the guiding force that leads the ego toward integration and wholeness. In Horus's case, he embodies this self-actualizing force, which pushes the ego to fight for justice and alignment with the greater order of the cosmos. On the other side, we have Seth, who embodies the shadow, the darker, repressed, and often rejected aspects of the psyche. According to Jung, the shadow consists of all the traits, desires, and emotions that we deny or repress, but that nonetheless exert influence on our lives. Seth, as the god of chaos, is the psychic force that represents everything that threatens the stability of the ego. He is destructive, jealous, and filled with a need for power at all costs. In a psychological context, Seth represents the parts of ourselves that are often ignored or pushed into the unconscious because they are seen as undesirable or dangerous. Yet, when left unchecked, these unintegrated parts can destroy the very structure of our lives. Jung emphasized that the shadow is not inherently evil. It contains valuable potential, but only when it is consciously acknowledged and integrated. In the myth, Seth's actions symbolize how unchecked unconscious forces, such as repressed desires, fears, and unresolved emotions, can manifest in destructive ways if left in the darkness. The shadow seeks to disrupt the ego's attempts at order and control, and in doing so, it calls attention to the unexamined parts of the psyche that demand to be recognized. The battle between Horus and Seth is not merely a physical confrontation. It represents the psychological conflict between the ego and the shadow. Horus must face Seth in multiple trials, and these trials symbolize the tests that the ego must undergo in the process of individuation. In one notable trial, Seth transforms into a hippopotamus to challenge Horus, symbolizing how the unconscious can become an overwhelming and seemingly unstoppable force. Horus, however, is aided by his wisdom and divine support, using his intellect and strategy to overcome Seth's physical strength. This trial mirrors how the ego, when confronted with chaotic and destructive emotions, the shadow, must rely on conscious awareness, intuition, and strength of purpose to overcome the negative forces within. The other trials between Horus and Seth highlight the importance of confronting the inner darkness and transforming it through conscious effort. These trials are not simply external battles, but represent the internal work we must face when we strive to integrate the shadow, the unwanted, repressed, or hidden aspects of ourselves that have been denied and pushed into the unconscious. In the culmination of the battle, Ra, the supreme god, intervenes to judge the conflict between Horus and Seth. Ra represents the self in Jungian psychology, the central archetype that holds the wisdom and guiding energy necessary to lead the ego toward integration and balance. Ra's judgment is a pivotal moment in the myth, symbolizing the higher consciousness that oversees the individuation process. Ra's role as the wise and just judge reflects the need for the ego to seek the guidance of the higher self or universal wisdom in order to navigate the chaos of the unconscious. This divine intervention symbolizes how, in the process of individuation, the ego must seek guidance from the self in order to move beyond the primal forces of chaos and destruction represented by Seth. Ra's decision favors Horus, not just because of his strength, but because of his rightness. Horus embodies order, justice, and the rightful path. Seth, on the other hand, represents the destructive forces that arise when chaos and the shadow are left unchecked. By recognizing the need to integrate the shadow, rather than allowing it to dominate the psyche, the ego can achieve balance and growth. With Seth defeated and cast out, Horus is crowned as the rightful king of Egypt. This symbolizes the integration of the psyche. Horus's victory over Seth is a triumph of order and justice over chaos. It's the restoration of Ma'at, the divine balance that holds the universe together. In Jungian terms, Horus's victory represents the integration of the ego with the unconscious, achieving a state of psychic balance where both light and shadow are acknowledged and harmonized. The battle between Horus and Seth is the very struggle we face when we confront our own shadow, integrate its lessons, and move toward wholeness. The battle between Horus and Seth is not just a mythological conflict between gods. It is a powerful psychological narrative that reflects the internal conflict we all face as we move through life. The story shows us that chaos and order, light and dark, conscious and unconscious, must all find their rightful place in the psyche. By confronting and integrating the shadow, we achieve a higher level of consciousness and inner peace. The myth reminds us that, just as Horus faced trials and adversities on his path to becoming the rightful ruler, we too must confront our own inner darkness, accept it, and ultimately transcend it to achieve wholeness. The process of individuation is not about eradicating the shadow, but integrating it, allowing it to inform our growth and strengthen our sense of self.